You're listening to TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour with your host, the Director of Dixie Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
As always, it's an honor to be sitting behind the golden Dixie Heritage microphone for this week's TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour. And our guest this week is the blogger known as Dissident Mama, who has just returned from a near month-long pilgrimage to Russia. Tell me about your trip to Russia. Was that a religious trip? Was that a vacation? A journalistic trip? What was that?
Mostly kind of a religious pilgrimage slash vacation slash we wanted our kids to go to a foreign country. They had only left once before. We went to Mexico a couple years ago to Puerto Vallarta, and we just want to be able to, give our three sons experiences going to different places and different cultures, different languages, that kind of thing. But I would say overall it was, we may have gone to Russia one day if we weren't Orthodox Christians, but that really, set a fire under us to go and look at Orthodox history there and go see the architecture and attend liturgies in a foreign language. I would say religious pilgrimage more than anything.
Have you ever been to Alaska?
I have not, but that is a place that an American Orthodox will probably go on a pilgrimage as well, because that's how Orthodoxy really came through Alaska and then went down the West Coast. Really, people were, ethnic groups were coming over here and settling, in the Northeast that brought some Orthodoxy with them. But really, the big crux of it coming to America came through Alaska. So no, I haven't, but I would love to go there.
When I was in Sitka, and I very briefly pastored a church in Sitka, on the island, there are Sitkas on Baranof Island, and Baranof Island was where the Tsar had his summer home.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And it's also where the Metropolitan had his palace. I cannot remember the name of the Metropolitan at the time. There was one of the Metropolitans who had decided, and this was before the war between the states, but he had decided that he wanted to move the head of the church, everything of the church, from Moscow to Baranof Island.
Oh, interesting.
They built a very elaborate palace for him, and also, the buildings that they built, and basically the church was organized with the headquarters, and so right there on Baranof Island. So there was a brief period of time in the history of the Russian Orthodox Church, maybe about 15, 20 years, where that was kind of like their Vatican.
Yeah, I think they called that the golden age of the Orthodox Church in Alaska.
And that building, and all of that is still there to be toured. And of course, all the icons are in there. And I was impressed seeing it, being a Baptist. And of course, that might be a little bit easier pilgrimage to take for a lot of people than Russia, just because you don't need a passport. But I just wondered if you'd ever been up there. So what happened when you were in Russia? Tell me what Russia was like.
The word I used to describe the trip is overwhelming, but in a good way, because not knowing the Russian language, my kids and husband knew some, and they picked up a lot, but I'm not very good at picking up foreign languages. But, you're being overwhelmed by everybody speaking a foreign language. And in Moscow, you could find people here and there that knew English just because it's become this huge, very modern city. But, so you have this language barrier. Then, of course, it's snowing all the time. And I love snow, but it literally snowed every single day. And then, things are just a little bit different there, too. And the architecture, their history is so amazing, but they still have up so many pieces of the history. So you can see this, Stalin-esque, brutalist architecture concrete blob there that's still there, and people still live in it, and you can go inside them and they're beautiful, but the outside still just looks like this horrible, ugly, Stalin-esque building. And it can be right beside a beautiful 500-year-old onion dome church. And then right beside that is like the world's fanciest McDonald's, So your senses are constantly being overwhelmed because things here, to us old is, wow, 1700s, maybe 1600s, right? But there, you're overwhelmed by how old things are and how everything's still represented there. It's cold and people are speaking a foreign language, and you just get this sense that, the world's a very big place. And I also got the sense that, I wasn't anti-Russian or anti-Putin or anything before I went, but that they're just normal people trying to do their own thing. That to me was just a beautiful aspect of it. Moscow, I expected to be dirty and dangerous, and it was the cleanest city I've ever been to. And I've been to a lot of big cities. It was so clean, and it was safe. After a couple of days, we were staying with some friends in an Airbnb, and I'd be like, oh, I'm going to run down to the store and get some whatever, and I would just be walking around Moscow by myself. There's probably definitely parts of New York and Chicago and heck, other cities that I wouldn't be doing that in. I lived in New Orleans for a summer, and 1998, women did not walk around by themselves in the French Quarter. There's places in America you can't do that. And there's probably places in Russia you can't do that either. But, Moscow was just clean and safe. And it was just, again, overwhelming. You're walking down the road, and there's something very modern and capitalistic, and it's right beside, some Soviet memorial, you see all these Tsar statues, and it's right beside, a Stalin's Seven Sisters. Another thing, too, they're really taking care of their old architecture. So everything's constantly being cleaned. There's scaffolding on old things. They're just really taking care of the churches as well. But just anything old, they really want to preserve it. They were doing that in St. Petersburg as well. We went there for a couple days. But it was really targeted in Moscow, and we heard that, Putin just really wants it to be a world-class city and to be beautiful, and I think he's from St. Petersburg, but, he lives in Moscow, and he just wants it to be beautiful and represent the Russian people. And that's another thing there, too. They do not mind talking about their history, and they don't really tear stuff down. Now, there were, obviously, under Soviet communism, they did tear stuff down, but since the fall of Soviet communism, there's still tons of Soviet things up. Their subway in Moscow was built in the 1930s. Everything has hammer and sickles. There's mosaics of Lenin in there. There's, all these things to the 1905 and the 1907 revolution. Beautiful sculptures. Their subway was beautiful. I do not like communism at all, but I was constantly taking pictures. It was just gorgeous. So they don't tear that down. They just know this is part of our story. We're not communist anymore, but there's no reason to go around tearing out our beautiful subway system. Let's just make it look pretty because it's part of our story. And of course, as a Southerner, I respected that, that they still have this stuff up. Now, the Soviets did intentionally put up statues of Marx and Lenin, within monasteries. And, they turned monasteries into prison camps and apartment buildings and governmental agencies and stuff. Now, obviously, the monasteries have moved that stuff out. But, it's outside of the monastery walls, in the public square. There's just all sorts of stuff because Americans, we think their history, they were communists. Oh, yeah, there was this Tsar guy, and yeah, I think he got murdered, and then there was a bunch of communists running around. Their story is 1,000 years old, and their cities, their landscapes represent that. And again, overwhelming to a person who thinks, the 1860s was a long time ago, So it was just amazing, and the people there were, they get this reputation as being cold, and they don't go around smiling and waving, and Southerners do. We smile and we wave. But once you broach them face to face, they're very kind people. The babushkas, the little old ladies, loved me because I had 3 kids. So they would always come up and start talking to me, and I would just say English. Sometimes they knew some broken English. Other times they would just giggle and hug me and run off and point to the kids and smile. They were happy that I had 3 children. They were excited about that. So it was just a lovely, overwhelming experience, and I would go back in a heartbeat. And I have hope for the Russian people because they've been through a lot.
So were you able to talk to any of the Russian people about what's going on in our country with the destruction of monuments and with the fact that we're doing things that they're not doing? Did you get any commentary from any Russian people on that?
Yeah, a little bit. They just think we're crazy. They're becoming these, ardent traditionalists over there, and like I said, they're still modern too, which is they're kind of Russia's ironic. They're starting to embrace this traditionalism. They're starting to go back to church. There's this renaissance and orthodoxy, but they're still very modern too. They drive Mercedes and have fancy nails and are have fancy haircuts and stuff. You know what I mean? It's the push and pull of old and modern, but they make it work. Yeah, I think they just think we get upset about all the wrong things, which I can agree with that. I think they just think it's silly.
Well, one thing about Russia that I think, and maybe you observe this, that I think is one of the strengths of their being able to preserve their culture and their history, is that they're not inundated with immigration like our country is.
Yeah, I mean, talk about the visa process to get into Russia almost killed my husband. I mean, and we kept saying, we weren't like, oh, I can't believe these Russians, they're such jerks for making us go through all this and pay all this money. No, I was absolutely, that's what everybody should be doing. You should make it hard for people to come into your country, and you should know what the heck they're doing. And, we had to get an invitation letter, all sorts of stuff. I honestly, that was beyond my pay grade. My husband did it all, but it was like a part-time job, just getting it all in line so they could know who we were, where we were going to be. We had to give them an itinerary, tell them when we were leaving. There's some wiggle room in there. There was something we planned to do later in the trip that we didn't. We weren't going to get carted off to jail or anything, but they want to know what you're doing, and you do have to get an invitation letter of a Russian citizen saying, this person is cool, they're coming here, they're doing it for religious purposes or just travel or whatever, and they would be an asset as a tourist in our country. So that's very interesting. Now, there is some immigration there from the stands, all those former Soviet areas, I call them the stands, and they will have some immigration there. From what I can tell, it's pretty darn controlled. They want to know who's there, why they're there, and that type of thing.
You talked about the Stalin-esque buildings and things. It's the snow all the time. And I can remember, as a kid watching television, and whenever they showed the Soviet Union or Russia, everything looked all bleak and dreary and dark. And yet everybody who's ever visited that country has told me how colorful it was.
Yeah, it was very beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I assume if you went there in the 1940s, maybe it wasn't, after the de-Stalinization process that happened, under Soviet communism, I think they not only tried to stop killing so many people, but I think they tried to quell some of that just oppression that Stalin perpetuated on, and I would say his people, which is interesting because Stalin's not even a Russian. I mean, he was from Georgia. So that's an interesting thing too. I see corollaries. I will blog about this eventually if I can ever have the time, but corollaries between the South and Russia. They had an invading force come in through a foreign idea, right? Marxism was this crazy German idea, right? That was imported to Russia and pushed upon a people that the majority didn't want it. Now, a lot of people weren't happy with the Tsar, but I don't think they necessarily wanted Soviet communism. They may have wanted reform or, something like that, more rights for the people or whatever, stuff like that. I mean, there was resistance to some of the impression that the Tsar system put on the people. However, they didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. A lot of them wanted just reform. And in fact, we went to the Gulag Museum, and a lot of the people in the Gulags were Marxists. They just did not like all the murder that came along with it, or they thought, oh, this isn't being practiced the way we thought. We think it's supposed to be peaceful. We don't think people are supposed to be carted off in the middle of the night, never to be seen again. So, I mean, there's so many different layers. Just like in America, we see things as black and white. Abraham Lincoln was a saint, and, the South were all horrible, evil, racist. That's not the story there either. There's so many nuances. It's just a fascinating history. Yeah, I do definitely see a corollary there because now they're wanting to claim their identity. And that's something that a lot of people in the West don't like. Oh, we are America's for everybody and we're an idea and we're a proposition nation. That's all gobbledygook made up stuff by progressives, And they understand that there. They know that, no, it's okay to want to help your people. It's okay to want Russian people to be happy because you're a Russian. I mean, throughout history, mankind has done that, and tribalism gets this bad name and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, it's okay. If people want to have prosperity and, freedom or do whatever they want to do, because that's what their people want. And they don't want outside influencers telling them they're horrible and they're evil. They're a reason to start a third world war. And I find that fascinating. And, I joke, I try to trigger people sometime and I say, Putin for president in 2020, and it's because I don't know if I would necessarily want Vladimir Putin to be my president, but the point is, he says stuff that the rest of the world hates, but it's true. He talks about the evils of globalism. He talks about the value of tradition and roots and ancestry. And these are just things that need to be said. And of course, as a Southerner, back to that corollary, absolutely. We just want to be left alone doing our own thing, but we're constantly being told we can't do that. We have to be remade. We have to be reconstructed. It's the New South. Get rid of your old ways. And Putin's saying no. And the Russian people, not everybody loves him, but he's extremely popular there. They're saying, hell yeah, absolutely.
On that note, let's break for a commercial from our sponsor, The Barnes Review. If you love listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, then I know that you'll love reading The Barnes Review. The Barnes Review is one of my favorite magazines. I began reading The Barnes Review long before they became a sponsor here on the program. In The Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There's just not a more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So if you'll visit www.barnesreview.org, that's www.barnesreview.org, you can find out how you too can become a subscriber to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review by mail, or you can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review electronically in PDF editions. Or you can subscribe to receive both. That's what I do. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. Well, there was a time when you were the journalism major, who was the Southern girl from Virginia attending the ultra-liberal University of Wisconsin, and you were swallowing the Marxist lies hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
So what was your aha moment when you realized that Marxism was just a bunch of BS and started re-embracing and reclaiming and even advocating for your history?
Well, you know how people today are one day they're leftist person marching in rallies, and then a month later they're all of a sudden, Ron Paul people or radical Christians. It happens so fast now. My evolution took a long time. 9/11 kind of woke me up, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? Why do these people hate us so much? What's going on here? You're just fat and happy and comfortable, and the 90s were great, and I was partying and just being this wild leftist lady, and then all of a sudden, you realize, wow, the world can be a scary place. I got married also in 2000, so, I was throwing off the shackles of saying, oh, marriage is an oppressive institution and all that stuff that I bought into, because I minored in women's studies. I learned about white privilege and all that jazz and male privilege back in the 90s. This is nothing new. The progressives have been pushing this stuff for decades. But so anyway, I get married. 9/11 happens. I just start thinking outside of the box of selfishness, just selfishness. And I'm going to do whatever I want. And, a woman can do anything and she doesn't need any help. Well, that's just untrue. Help is very helpful. We can't do all the things we want to do in this life by ourselves. So anyway, just the realistic, life was hitting me in the face. And then, I just started reading. I just started researching. Hey, I would have, friends say, hey, read this person, or, this book's really good. I just started educating myself. Here I was, I thought I was the super smart person, had a degree from a fancy university or whatever, and I was dumb as a box of rocks. I was a sheep. So I just started doing that. And then as I'm continuing to be married to my husband, who's a very smart person, he was never a hostile atheist. He was always kind of spiritual, like in high school, he dabbled with Buddhism and all of this kind of stuff. So, we were always searching for God, even though I was a hostile atheist. If you hate God that much, you obviously believe in him. You know what I mean? Like, why spend so much time being hostile to this thing that doesn't even exist? So I see that now. But, God's always pulling at our hearts. So anyway, we're being together, talking, doing all this stuff while we finally, our hearts are softened and we become Christians in around 2006. We had some friends help guide us along the way, but, the Holy Spirit said, it's time. So that is something that, of course, helped me wake up from my selfish, nihilistic stupor, and then having kids. So, I'm having kids, I'm becoming a Christian, I'm reading things that, are completely counter to, the worldview I was, propagandized about in college, and it took a really long time, and I'm still learning now. Well, of course, when you're learning about autonomy and self-determination and rights and, freedom and liberty as an American, I returned to my roots of why were these people fighting in the South? Hey, it wasn't about slavery. Hey, it wasn't about just mean guys wanting to, be rich and, spit on the little guy or whatever, It's just a natural step in that process of going down the rabbit hole that I'm actually just finished a blog that was kind of talking about this. It makes sense because I know libertarians and voluntarists and all these people, in that kind of camp that still, they don't buy into Lincolnianism per se, but they're still like, oh, the South were traitors and blah, blah. One day they're going to get there because it's just part of the puzzle. I mean, it just is. Everything changed in 1865. Not that everything was perfect before, things were screwed up at the founding too, but everything changed. That is when America became an idea and equality is our God and everybody is exactly perfectly equal and egalitarianism is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, that is just pure Marxism. That is just evil, oppressive trash. And if you can't piece that together in your American history and understanding the war between the states, I mean, you're missing the forest for the trees. So anyway, then that all came back to me. And as a young person, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and there were monuments, and my high school was the Rebels. It was named after Douglas Southall Freeman, the Pulitzer Prize winning Lee biographer. We waved Confederate, battle flags at football games and stuff. So it was in me. I had pushed it away in college. I was shedding it. It's like people do now. The Quislings, as I call them, the Southerners who live in the South, benefit from the South, are better people because they have been growing up in the South in the beautiful and wonderful culture that it is, but then they want to spit on it and spit on their ancestors because that makes them feel morally superior. That's the fashionable thing to do now. So I guess I was doing that back in the 90s or whatever, but I just came back, but I still don't know everything and I'm constantly learning. And that's one reason I like blogging, because it gives me a reason to read cool stuff and listen to podcasts and all that kind of thing. Sometimes I need to take a break from it though, because the world is so overwhelming, but
you look at what's going on in Virginia right now. There's no way to describe it except to just call it, they're proposing infanticide. Mm-hmm. Back when you were in your liberal days, would you have been embracing what's going on in Virginia right now, or do you think that this would have been, for you back then, even a bridge too far?
That's a good question, because I assume if I had stayed a leftist, I would have gotten increasingly more leftist over the years. Because one of the reasons I think I came back to normalcy, whatever you want to call it, right thinking, is I always liked debating people. So I wouldn't want to shut somebody down if they disagreed with me. I wouldn't want to spit in their face or throw urine on them. I liked debating people I disagreed with. I also thought that what I believed in represented liberty and freedom and, a better life for people. I honestly don't know how modern leftists, the Antifa people, how they can even think that what they want to push is good for people. I don't know. If I was still a leftist in 2019, having gone through, decades and decades of more indoctrination and Kool-Aid drinking, maybe. I don't know. I would, but, I knew people who had abortions, and, when you have people who are affected by something, you don't want to say, hey, maybe the thing you did spiritually broke you and it's hurting you. Let's talk about what you did was wrong, and let's encourage people not to do this thing. No, what do leftists do? They double down. They throw themselves on whatever this thing is and make it seem wonderful, because they have to do that. Their own psyche makes them do that, because otherwise you have to self-reflect, right? Right? This is why people who have sons and daughters that are gay, hey, they're Reagan Republicans, but all of a sudden they're marching in LGBT rallies. It's because nobody wants to judge. Nobody wants to say, oh, this thing that you're doing can lead to sin and can ultimately, it's going to impede your happiness and, of course, your relationship with God, but it's just not good for you spiritually, mentally, physically. Well, with abortion, people double down on that, and they just say, yeah, now it's shout your abortion. Yeah, now it's don't be ashamed, wear your Gloria Steinem t-shirt, and put your fist in the air that says I had an abortion, even though women know that what they have done is wrong, because it's just their instincts. It is their nature. That's why there are abortion recovery classes. This is why women who have had abortions have higher eating, disorder rates and suicides, and they, it affects their relationship with men and how they parent. It absolutely manifests itself in its life. So, long answer to that is, I don't know. It depends. I could have had an abortion by now. I could have known more people. I could have thrown myself into the movement, because that's what I did. I would hate to think that I would be supporting infanticide, but this is what leftism does, and this is why I call it evil. It pushes evil, and people are not right-thinking. They are not clear-headed when they support these ideas. And when you don't call them out, I just think that is not doing anybody any good, especially babies and men and women and families. So I don't know. Who knows? I would probably be out there marching on the street saying it was great.
If I hear this stuff coming out of New York, as horrible as it is, I can dismiss it and just, these damn Yankees are just, pushing the envelope again.
Right.
The same thing if it's coming out of Los Angeles. Well, it's those freaky weirdos out in California. Or if it's coming from, say, Seattle, because only God knows how weird the people up in Washington State are. Having been to Washington State, let me tell you, that is, that's a travesty of justice that such a beautiful place could be allowed to be occupied by such weird people. But anyways.
Portland, Oregon. Whew.
Yeah. This isn't coming out of one of the centers of Weirdville or Yankeetown.
Right. Northam is a Virginian.
Exactly. This is coming out of the heart of the South. And, this is coming out of the capital of the Confederacy. I don't believe that our Southern ancestors could have even comprehended, let alone would have proposed infanticide. It's one thing, like I said, the Yankees proposed it, but this is coming out of the capital of the Confederacy. How could the South be that far gone? We're the ones proposing this evil upon the world.
It's because we've lived under Reconstruction for 150 years. Nobody wants to stand up for what's right. It's just easier to go along. And that's why I call it the poison of progressivism. It seeps in and it gets inside people. And, back to New York doing it, I believe in federalism. I believe in states' rights. I believe in divided sovereignty and all that jazz, but also that's not the world we live in. So you have, some libertarian leaning people going, oh, well, that state can do what they want. Well, yes, in theory, but we live under a central authority now. And what New York does is it will come to the rest of America. Like they say, whatever happens in California ends up happening to the rest of the world. Massachusetts had gay marriage, 15 years ago or whatever. Now, what is it? The law of the land or whatever.
Yeah.
This is the world we live in. So we have to fight our battles in the reality we live in. And then as far as Northam goes, Virginians, native born, want to blame it all on, Northern Virginia and all the government employees that live there and have turned that into just a horrible place. I mean, that was horrible back in the 80s. We used to make fun of Nova back in the 80s and all the transplants and Yankees that lived up there. It's enrichment, and it's people who are born and raised there. This is what progressivism does. It makes people feel good. I mean, I don't know, it's like pack mentality. You just do what everybody else is doing, and then you just go one step further so people applaud you and tell you you're wonderful. Nobody applauds you when you stand up for life or for monuments or for federalism. People think you're crazy and call you a hater and a racist and a Nazi, and most people just aren't willing to be called those names. And Northam, I don't know, he's just crazy. I don't know.
And you know what blows my mind about all this? Is that there are all of the people who are demanding that he resign, be it the president of the NAACP or Hillary Clinton, pick your person, who is demanding that Northam resign because he wore blackface in a dance contest in college.
Right.
And of course, the media won't call it blackface, they call it darkening makeup. Which is funny because when a Republican wears blackface, they call it blackface. When a Democrat wears blackface, apparently they call it darkening makeup. But that's a whole nother radio conversation.
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous. And I'm not in the business of defending Northam. I hope he crashes and burns.
Yeah,
if you hang out with dogs, you're going to get fleas. That's what I'm saying.
But they're demanding. They are demanding. Hillary Clinton demanding he resign because he wears blackface. Why aren't they demanding his resignation because he proposed infanticide?
Right? I mean, why do they care about babies being torn apart at the border, supposedly, but, babies being torn from the womb? No big deal. Because they're crazy. Because leftism is a mental disorder. It just is.
Extra, read all about it.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are because you're listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net.
Extra, read all about it.
Now there's this thing called white feminism. So, white feminists can be an ally to people of color who are feminists, but they can't march in the front of the parade. Oh, they can't be wearing their, hats or having a platform. It has to be all people of color. White women are the foot soldiers of feminism. And eventually, some of them are going to be like, hey, if I can't be out there with my fist in the air in the front of the line, you can stick it where the sun don't shine. I mean, and then, of course, if they're doxxed and, one day, 20 years ago, they did this thing, and then all of a sudden this person is doxxed for being some horrible, evil person and loses their job. It's going to be a rude awakening, and that is what's going to happen. We all you and I want to stand up for what's right, but a lot of people Americans are too comfortable. We are just too comfortable in our big houses with our Super Bowls and our 4,000 square foot houses or whatever, in our 2-car garage. Until it comes to your front door, some Americans are just not going to wake up. Now, there are some people who are just lost causes. I honestly do believe that. They are too steeped in the evil and the nihilism to ever come out. I mean, God can handle that, but that's something that when I blog, I don't write to those people because they're just crazy. I think some people can have their minds changed, but it might take something very, very, very bad happening to them in their family.
In your most recent blog, or at least the most recent one that I read, and it was here a couple of weeks ago now in the Dixie Heritage newsletter, we reprinted it.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I can't remember exactly how you worded the headline. I think it was "Damn straight, MAGA is the new Confederate battle flag."
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So how did you come to that conclusion?
My husband and I were talking. Yeah, and we were just in the kitchen talking and cooking. That's where I get all my brilliant ideas. And we were just talking about the Covington kids and the hat. The hat itself has become a symbol of racism. I had a very lovely person who I know through church, never political, ever, post something political on Facebook saying the MAGA hat is just racist. You know, it can't be worn. It is just something that because people have done horrible things in it cannot be tolerated in the public view anymore. It just can't be. It is an unchristian thing. And then we just started thinking, you know, that's exactly what's happened to the battle flag. Now, I don't know any news story about somebody in a MAGA hat doing something crazy. I really don't. I know about people in MAGA hats getting beaten up and eggs thrown at them and accosted and screamed at and pushed down and, you know, mobs going off on them. I do know about that, but I really don't know of any story of a person in a MAGA hat going out and just starting some trouble with somebody, you know, and calling people horrible names. I don't. It could be out there, but I haven't seen it. However, we do know that sometimes under the battle flag, just as the American flag, just as under other symbols, that some things that most people don't approve of have been done under the battle flag. Well, that is not the battle flag's fault. Right. That is not my ancestors' fault. That is not true Southern history's fault. People do stupid things all the time. You know, I mean, the swastika was a Buddhist symbol, for goodness sake. You know, I mean, we can't control what people do. And if you fall into the narrative of saying, oh, well, yeah, let's just assume MAGA people have done some horrible things and we just shouldn't do that. No, that is playing into their hands, just like, you know, I have battle flag memorabilia all over my house. Now, I will tell you, I do not fly a battle flag on my house. We fly other Confederate flags that our neighbors do not know are Confederate flags. We have the Choctaw Confederate flag out there right now. I ordered the Missouri battle flag the other day. I'm going to put that up because that one has a cross on it. I love that one. Plus, a friend of mine who just died is from Missouri, so I kind of ordered it in his honor. But anyway, when they come into our house, they will see it. And I have neighbors who are in mixed race relationships, and they get to know us as people out in our yards and with our kids playing in the street and walking our dogs. And then they think, oh, that lady's pretty nice. And then they come into my house for a birthday party or to borrow a cup of sugar, and then they see it. So to me, I hate that it has to be this way. And it really upsets my kids sometimes because they're like, but we're not ashamed of it, Mom. But I say, we have to know what hill to die on, and we don't want to push people away. We want people coming over to our side to understand that it is a beautiful symbol and it is something lovely, and it means nothing hateful at all. So that's kind of how we do it. But like on Lee Jackson Day, my kids have all those flags on sticks. They have a whole array of them. I mean, we got one in Mexico a few years ago. We have, pirate flags and all sorts of stuff. And we have obviously a bunch of flags too, which include the battle flags in there too. I let them line them all up on the front lawn. So the neighbors did see the battle flag that day, but we just have to be careful about it. But with the MAGA hat, I don't own one, but if I did, I would wear it. I've been to 2 Trump rallies. I just think playing by their rules is not good. And with the MAGA hat, it's such a new symbol of supposed hate. I think that's why I want people to resist that at all. And that's one reason I wrote about my friend in the blog. And, we've ended up having this discussion over Messenger. And I think he's a person that could actually be a Southern sympathizer, whether or not he's, out there giving money to, monument causes or something. I don't know, but I think he could be somebody who might speak up for monuments eventually. And I don't even know if he's against them now, but he could definitely be one. But with the battle flag, there is so much history. we just have to tread lightly sometimes. At least that's how we do it in my family. But I fully support people who have them on their license plates and, whatever. That's awesome. But just my family, we've made the personal decision to be a little more cautious about it and have people come into our home, then they can see how radical we are.
You talk about the Covington kids. I had read recently an editorial, and I can't remember where I was reading the editorial at. It was a national magazine somewhere. The person editorializing was saying how you could just see the racism on this kid's face who was wearing the MAGA hat.
Oh, breaks my heart, that poor kid.
I've seen pictures of this alleged incident and so forth, and for the life of me, I've tried to see the racism in his facial expression. George Orwell talked about that in 1984. He described what was called a face crime because thoughts were of course illegal in Orwell's society.
Right.
And so a face crime was when your facial expression was conveying or betraying an illegal thought because the police obviously knew how to interpret what you were thinking based upon the expression that was on your face. But what they called the face crime was how they could justify arresting you for the thought crime without actually being able to read your thoughts.
If you go off the cliff with radical egalitarianism, you eventually have to get rid of people's faces, right? Some people are born beautiful. They just are. Sorry. Some people are born not physically attractive. That's life. People are born with missing limbs. People are born needing wheelchairs, right? So eventually, if you keep going down this path, it is going to be everybody's wearing a bag on their head or we're all in a burqa. So you can't see who we are because some people are stunningly beautiful. Some people are physically fit, right? Some people have talent over the others. So that's just part of it too, that I don't think the leftists are realizing, but that is coming. That's the whole point. We are different and diverse. They're the ones always talking about diversity. And it's like, people are different. And we should celebrate that in the fact that, that's one. I love that people are born naturally, artistically inclined. We all benefit from that. True diversity, God-given diversity. Some people are born fighters. Some people are born lovers. We need all of those people to make our society work, Some people are leaders. Some people are followers. It is human nature. And then on top of that, my point too is as a mother, that child, Nick Sandman, reminded me of my oldest son, who's just 11. But as a mother, I watched the videos. I saw his face. You could tell that child was scared to death. That was a nervous smile. That wasn't a racist smile. That was this kid going, I don't know what's going on, but we've just been taunted by these black Hebrew dudes for an hour, called the most vulgar names. Then I had some dude beating a drum in my face. I'm just sitting here waiting for my bus. I've been at a pro-life rally, for goodness sake, and this is what I'm doing. He was standing his ground, and that was just a nervous smile because the kid is a teenager. And I just wanted to fly to Kentucky and give him a hug. You could tell he was so nervous, but just wanting to do what's right. So that's point two, that as a mother, for somebody to call a beautiful human being, just a person trying to be a man and a gentleman and stand his ground because he doesn't want to be a doormat either, that is just horrifying to me. And then point three is he's a white Christian male. They're not at the bottom of the totem pole. They're not on the totem pole. They are not on the victim pyramid. And as this is why, the mama bear in me comes out, is because I have 3 sons who happen to be white, male, and Christian, Right. And I think sometimes even right-leaning, libertarian, Southern people I know that just have daughters don't even understand how passionate I get, because if they were white women standing there, white young girls, there might have been some stuff going on, but I'm telling you, that man would not have come up and beat that drum in their face. They may have gotten some stuff thrown at them about those black Hebrews because they were throwing it at other women too. If you watch that whole video, it is astounding. But the media would have never latched onto it because women, even white ones, even Christian ones, are on the victim pyramid. white Christian men aren't. So that's another thing to me too. That whole thing, and the fact that some people knee-jerk believed the media. Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy, he believed them at first, and he's a pretty smart guy. He's pretty woke and conservative on some stuff, and he came out and apologized. He did the right thing. But how can you believe the media? Even my mom, who is very conservative, said, well, the media said XYZ at first. They said, and I've said, anytime I hear the mainstream media say anything, I believe the opposite. Now, they could have part truth. It could be an outright lie. And sometimes every once in a while, they'll tell you something truthful. But people need to just have the knee-jerk reaction instead of believing what they say and then 3 days later figuring out they're huge liars. The knee-jerk reaction needs to be nothing they say is true. Absolutely nothing. And if it is just a nugget, and they have left out 99% of the story. This is how we have to get. And I keep thinking, when are people going to wake up? And I do think this Covington thing, because people were standing up. I'm in all sorts of Christian Facebook groups and homeschool groups where, sometimes people are kind of meek and, we don't want to stir up trouble in unity and, we don't want to say anything hurtful and offend. Well, sometimes you have to offend when you're standing up for right. The cross is offensive, people. We need to stand up for people when they are being maligned for no reason other than being white, Christian, and male. And this is the world we live in. So the whole Covington kids thing I think it may have been a turning point for some people, but you still have people on the left doubling down, calling for death threats and all sorts of stuff. It's just crazy.
The North Carolina Heritage Political Action Committee was organized by concerned citizens of North Carolina in 2015 in response to the increased attacks on North Carolina's history and heritage. The North Carolina Heritage PAC supports state and local candidates for public office who pledge and show their support for the protection of Confederate memorials and the preservation of all of North Carolina's history. We all know that Confederate memorials and symbols are the easy targets, and that the end game of our leftist enemies is to erase and rewrite all of history, from the colonies to the War on Terror. If we fight them for our state's rich Confederate history and heritage, we may be able to stop them from their mission of total destruction. Join the North Carolina Heritage PAC now by visiting ncheritagepac.org. Once again, that is www.ncheritagepac.org. And help us on the front lines of North Carolina politics. The mission statement of North Carolina Heritage PAC is that the North Carolina Heritage PAC was created with the purpose of supporting diverse efforts to defend and preserve the heritage, traditions, monuments, cemeteries, flags, emblems, and other legacies of North Carolina history against those efforts to remove, deface, legislate against, alter, and otherwise corrupt or pervert their meaning, history, presentation, and standing in our state. Once again, www.ncheritagepac.org. Well, you had mentioned in an email that you had sent out to your subscribers recently that was almost word for word what I had said on my radio show, was it 2 Fridays ago, I believe. And that is that when the left gets louder, we get louder.
Yes.
That, basically once you've been tagged, once you've been marked by the left, they will never let you rest. They will never let you have a moment's worth of peace. There is no amount of compromise that you can make with them at that point that will ever allow you to have a moment's rest. So you might as well just go ahead and just get all in.
Yeah.
And the louder they get, the louder we get. What has brought you to that realization?
Watching what they do. They are like wild animals, and they just get their teeth in, and they don't want to let go. And it's also, again, back to that altruism. I think most people want to be nice, and they just want to be left alone. Well, I don't know if they want to be left alone, but they want to be nice. Okay, so they think if they maybe quietly support this person over here, or just every once in a while say, oh, yeah, that person's not a racist and they're not a Klan member over here. But we have to be loud. Or you don't tear down people who are willing to be loud, who are willing to put themselves on the line. I have people all the time, Christian people, telling me I stir division. I stir disunity. And I'm like, the disunity's here, people. And if you don't, and they'll even say sometimes that, oh, I agree with you, but, we don't want to offend. This is a fight for survival. And if you don't want to stand up and do what's right, get out my way. I mean, that's all I got to say is you need to get out of the way. I can't tell you the times I spend debating people who agree with me on probably most things. I mean, 75% of things. And I'm wasting my time with them telling me that I need to be kinder and gentler and all this stuff. I don't have time for that. People who are standing up to the evils of cultural Marxism don't have time for that. We need to be supported. Do you know what I mean? We need to, that's why I'm always support the remnant. Support the remnant. If you don't want to speak up, give people money, share their podcasts. Don't waste their time telling them they're disunifiers when all they're doing is trying to stop cultural Marxism from taking over families and education and churches and our entire daggone globe minus Russia. I mean, come on, wake up. So on top of that, I'm going to dox myself soon. My husband and I want to do it the right way because, I write under a pen name, and I've done that for safety reasons because the left is crazy, but I feel like I need to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to do that soon. But my husband and I want to make sure our finances are in order because he could get fired from his corporate job for being, married to a radical person who likes being Southern and thinks being white is pretty darn okay too, and, thinks leftism is ridiculous.
Well, you talk about that on your website.
Yep, I'm doing it here and there, yeah. Yep, I'm going to have a picture, and I'm doing a memorial blog for my friend who just passed, and there's going to be my picture in there. And and if something happens to me, I hope to God there are people out there standing up for me and saying what was done to me was wrong. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah, that's going to happen. But that's another thing. Again, not all people are fighters. I get that too. But support people who are willing to be brave, who are willing to be fighters, who want to who resist. I'm not calling for violence. I'm not throwing, feces on people. And I think that's why the Covington thing sparked so much outrage in me, besides what I already told you about, is because it reminded me of Charlottesville 2017. Well, Charlottesville 2017 had, people there that, most normal people thought were scoundrels and all this stuff. There are probably some scoundrels there, of course, but there were all sorts of people there. And the fact that to this day, if you read anything about 2017, in the first paragraph, the first line, it always says, white supremacist rally. It was a white supremacist rally. No, it wasn't. I mean, that is just a lie that is in the ether, and it drives me insane. Well, that I think is not going to be the 100% accepted narrative with the Covington kids. So we have made some progress since 2017. However, James Fields is in jail. I think he got a 400-year sentence, He's the guy who, supposedly, killed Heather Heyer, ran down the road, whatever, and smashed into all these people. The evidence that maybe he was being chased, the evidence that Dwayne Dixon, a professor in North Carolina, was waving a gun at him as part of the Redneck Revolt. None of that matters. None of it matters that it's been told that he was walking people safely to his car. He was all alone in a city taken over by crazy people. And he's in his white shirt, going to his Dodge Charger. Well, yeah, he was scared to death. I mean, the point is that man is, I personally think he was fleeing and it was an accident, but there's so much more to the story. But the guy's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. For the rest of his life. If it was up to the anarcho tyrants today, that kid, Nick Sandman, would not get into college. He would be kicked out of his church. He would be, shunned like the Duke lacrosse players, he would have no future. His life would be destroyed. That is what leftism wants to do. And it didn't happen with the Covington kids. So thank God for the tiny amounts of progress we're making. That's all I got to say. But it's a slow uphill battle. People are just so indoctrinated to believe cable news and everything they're told. And it's because it's easy, being red pilled is exhausting.
Yep.
It's like the Matrix. It really is. You can take the blue pill and be comfortable and eat steaks and be happy. You're not free, but you're fat and happy. Or you can take the red pill and know truth, and it's exhausting. But I'd prefer to be red pilled and know the truth.
So do you have any other plans coming out here in the near future except for revealing your true identity?
Ooh, I know. I'll have to make it a big deal. Be like, you'll have to give me $100 on Patreon to know who I really am. That's what I should do. That would be smart. No, gosh, I want to write so many blogs about Russia. I have blog ideas coming out of my ears, but so that's it. Oh, I do have like I said, a memorial blog coming out for my friend, if I could give that a mention, just because he went under the pen name Louis Lieberman, and he ran something called Libertopia with his wife, Dawn. She also went by a pen name, but they did that because he had to work, in the real world, and he did a lot of, like libertarian and Southern Without Apology stuff too. He was very committed to his own chapter of the SCV. He did stuff for the SCV headquarters. He helped his friend Hezekiah Brown, who does all these awesome pro-Southern music videos. My friend would make the videos, but his real name was Matthew Silber. And he passed at age 41 yesterday, a week ago. Just died. Just one of those things that his wife said it could be, something having to do with his heart. But, nothing crazy going on. He just died. It was a complete mystery. So I've been dealing with that, but I'm just writing a memorial about him, and that even if you don't know who he is, you would know his work if you read my stuff, because I was always using his graphics. He was a graphic designer. So tons of my blogs have feature art from him or some of his cool stuff within the text. But he was a fighter, and he's an inspiration to people, and he was so mellow and so chill. He was like this peaceful warrior, but he was a resistor, man. So you don't have to be out there, shoving your fist in people's faces and screaming and doing stuff that the left does. We are civil and we have truth on our side, and you can expose truth and the insanity of the left in peaceful means. And that's how my friend Matthew did it. So I think he's a true inspiration. So if people could read the blog, I should have it out tonight or tomorrow. That would be appreciative. Plus his kid and wife, we have a GoFundMe. Shotwell Publishing just recently published his book, Snowflake Buddies, ABC Leftism for Kids. It was a satirical book about how you can be leftism, how you can be a leftist. So anyway, the folks at Shotwell Publishing and I created a GoFundMe for him and his wife, just because, this was just a devastating loss, and we want to help them out in any way that we can. But if they could read that blog and subscribe to my newsletter and help me out on Patreon, that would be wonderful. That's what's going on.
Well, once again, we are absolutely out of time here on TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour. I want to thank you for being with us for this last hour, and hope that next week, this same time, this same place, wherever you're at, however you're listening, that you'll be back and we will have yet another broadcast for you. I'd like to thank Dissident Mama for being our guest today. And for those of you who are watching on our YouTube page or who are online, you have access to the show graphics and not just the audio of the show. You will see, of course, that Dissident Mama has given us her picture so that you can see who she is. Of course, some of you looking at that picture may already know who she is. Others of you, of course, will find out her that known here in the near future, as she'll be releasing her name in due time. Anyways, if you will go to her website, dissidentmama.net, some great reading material there. And also, if you'll go to my website, www.dixieheritage.net, I'd love to send you a free copy of my newsletter every week, and I'd also love to send you a free copy of my book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. All you have to do is provide me with a valid email address, and I can send that to you. You don't have to supply your phone number, your credit card. You'll never have to send a check in the mail, nothing like that. We just want to put that material in your hands. And one other thing that we want to let you know about when you go to www.dixieheritage.net is that if you will donate $25 or more, we will send you a CD-ROM, and that CD-ROM will have all 51 episodes of TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour that we recorded during the year 2018. You'll get all of last year's broadcasts in MP3 format so that you'll be able to listen to them again or share them with your friends, or maybe even listen to them for the first time if you're a newer listener. And so be sure to do that. We'd love to put those in your hands as well. Well, anyways, from all of us here at TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour, God bless. See you next week.